starting. It started.
Good morning and welcome back to the Veterans in Politics candidate interviews for the Nevada State Assembly. I would like to thank our sponsors, Ron Q for Clark County Treasurer, Michael Broadway Real Estate, Real Water, and the Lakeside Business Suites. My name is Alexis Plunkett. I'm a Nevada criminal defense attorney, and we are about to begin with Nevada State Assembly District 5. I would first like to ask the panel to introduce themselves.
Mantis Toboggan, Veterans in Politics radio co-host.
Foust, US Army. Geraldi US Marine.
Now I'd like to give Mack Miller, candidate for District 5, about a minute to introduce yourself and tell us about your background.
Thank you very much. My name is Mack Miller, that's M-A-C-K, Miller, and I am a candidate for Nevada Assembly District 5. I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, 1976. Proud parent of an 8-year-old daughter who grows up in this community such as I did. I'm a product of the Clark County School District, and I've watched this city grow in leaps and bounds. I am the grandson of a great, wonderful woman who worked with the hotel industry here. I understand a lot about what it's like to grow up on the traditionally black side of this town, what we call the West Side. And I also know what it's like to move away from school, to come back, to leave the country, to come back, to fight in the armed forces, understand what other countries have to deal with when it comes to policy and politics, understand what our locals have to deal with when it comes to education, particularly when it comes to being able to get affordable housing and things of that nature. I've experienced both sides of the track. I have a background in law. I've held every position in a law firm from runner to clerk to associate and everything and beyond. I've worked with a lot of our elected officials over the last 20 years in helping them either get elected or do some of the right things. And I'm also an advocate for juvenile criminal reform. I'm the founder of Trial by Peers back in 1993, which is arguably the most successful juvenile criminal diversion program in the state. And it's spread across the nation, been replicated and duplicated in multiple jurisdictions. My reasons for running for Assembly District 5 is just that. My background in every area with every man and every woman and understanding what we all need generally, and to get rid of the chatter that's distracting us today and what we all specifically need, and that's safety and education for our children, and to be assured that we have something to do for the future to keep us safe and make sure that we can raise our families safely with jobs and everything that is entitled to us. And I don't say entitled, but the fact that we fought for this and we don't want to have someone take it back from us.
Thank you. I'd like to now turn it over to the panel for questions.
Geraldi, are you for or against banning semi-automatic assault weapons, and why?
I am not for banning them. I think it's a slippery slope. I believe in our Second Amendment rights. I do understand the argument that certain weapons should not be in the hands of the general public. I do agree with that. However, I believe that a more important issue is that we can't determine now how someone's mental state will be, particularly in the future. We have background checks. You look at the states and cities that have the most stringent gun restrictions. It didn't change the fact that they have the highest gun incidents, and those gun incidents traditionally and statistically aren't from those who are, have legally registered or acquired weapons. I always say that tightening gun restrictions, we can have a 5-year waiting period after someone's passed the background check. That's not going to decrease the violence and the crime with the guns, because the people that use them, they don't go get background checks. They don't go to a gun show. They don't go to a gun store to buy their guns and turn in their ID and say, oh yes, I'm a Crip, I'm a Blood, or whatever, or I intend on doing this, I'm going to rob a bank or go into a school. We hear this a lot. We hear about mental problems with a lot of the people, and I think it's 99% of those who've committed these horrible atrocities. The problem is we can't foresee the future. The best that we can do is to educate, not glorify certain things, and to make sure that people are more responsible when they do purchase their weapons, require some training like they do with the CCWs. things of that nature. But it's a very slippery slope to say, I want to outlaw a certain type of weapon straight out, because you chip at that rock over time and you'll end up with nothing but dust. And I take our Constitution very seriously, and I don't believe, and the forefathers we have, where the government doesn't get everything right, but there's some things out there that the government actually had some foresight with, and I think this is one of them. This is why we're the only nation that hasn't been attacked on our soil by an organized military.
Robert Foust, could you tell us a little bit about your district? What do you think is the biggest problem in your district, and what do you plan to do about it?
Okay. I have a very unique district, and I'm not sure if this mic is working or not, or if I need to use it, but,
Yeah.
okay.
The mic's working, but you do need to use it.
Great, okay. So my district is similar District 5, which is, it starts at Rainbow and it goes as far west as Grand Canyon. Doesn't quite go into Summerlin, it stops just shy of Wallapai. It starts on the northernmost point at Alta, and it goes on the southernmost point to Spring Mountain. The second largest demographic in my district is Asian. The third largest is African American, followed by Latin and other, okay? First, of course, 60% is Caucasian. We have a very unique district. The lakes and Canyon Gate are in my district. Now, growing up in Las Vegas, one of the things, we didn't have desert shores. Summerlin did not exist. And so the first community, and I believe they were the first considered the McMansions, were in the lakes. And what you found were people moved out, further out from the city. They found their quote-unquote good neighborhoods, and they moved their families there. Now, my district now is the most accessible district for what was affordable housing for those who wanted to get out of what they consider a bad neighborhood into a decent neighborhood and have reasonable and affordable housing. A family of 4 could have a house in the lakes for $1,100 a month, and that was quite reasonable for them and to be in a good area for their kids. Well, prices are rising. That's something, and crime. Crime has gone through the roof in my district. Now, I know this because no less than 6 of my neighbors on my street and the streets next to me have been robbed in the last 2 years. Now, that being said, I believe that is a major concern in my district. I know that is because I've talked to my neighbors about it and the people in my district. Also, I have one of the highest Asian populations. Now, as you know, Asians aren't that political, at least not here they're not. They're not so engaged in that. They're more cultural and they're more family oriented, but they are afraid to death of the crime rate, and they are concerned about education just like the rest of us are. So I have an 8-year-old, I sit on the school organization team, I was the co-chair of the first school organization team, and I sit on the PTA at MJ Christensen where my daughter goes to school. That being said, the questions I get is, what are you going to do about crime? Well, I worked tirelessly for the last 3 or 4 years to actually have a traffic division that was sitting on Durango and Sahara moved. Now you'd say, why would I move a traffic division? Because we were successful in getting a patrol unit division there. While people were trying to feed their families and get to work, they were getting ticketed with minor violations for traffic. Yes, we need to follow the rule of law. However, meanwhile, neighbors are getting robbed and they're having a response time that wasn't that great when it came to the police department. And I hail our first responders. However, it was more imperative to me that I make sure we had a unit there, which is why you now see more of the SUVs cruising up and down Durango and Sahara than you do the motorcycle cops now. And it has reduced crime a bit, but not where it needs to be.
Mantis, Toboggan, how would you say that you are uniquely suited to addressing these problems and introducing and passing any sort of legislation that would be particularly for your district?
Great. I have this, I mentioned earlier that I've held every position in the law firm. What I settled on was a legal strategist position, which is basically what I do is I work with attorneys in coming up with strategy on how they're going to handle their cases, whether they be for corporate law, whether it be in the boardroom, whether it be strategy for picking a jury trial or anything of that nature. Now, my background in the armed forces, in the Army, also gives me, and this is something that we have a lot of African Americans in my district, and it's across the nation we have this thing where everyone's going, they don't trust the police. Well, that's because they don't understand the police. Community policing is gone. So we don't have a lot of people that have any activity or engage with our law enforcement unless it's negative. So when every piece of engagement with your law enforcement is negative, you have a negative connotation and you see it negatively. So one of the things that I believe that I qualify better than my opponents in being able to take over this position is that I've experienced both sides of the law. I've been in the black neighborhood, in the bad neighborhood where there was community policing, but it was along the lines of the cops rolling down the street and yelling out friends' names over their bullhorn because they figured they weren't up to something good, okay? So I understand how that goes. Another thing is this. I only have one child, and that's my daughter. I'm learning a lot from her. And I'm learning a lot from the community and the PTA and the SOT and what's going on. And I've got an experience that's very unique. That being, when I say I've been on both sides of the tracks, I mean I've been financially well off and I've been in the dumps. I've had situations where my lights were turned off. I've had situations where I didn't have enough gas money and I would have to stay in West LA and not drive back to South Central because I wouldn't have gas to get back to my class the next morning. And I knew how to deal with that. As a legal strategist, my job is to bring people together and not make them think when they leave that table that they both won, because if both sides think they won when they leave the table, you had to lie to somebody. But my job and what I do very well is making sure that when they leave the table, they're one step closer to their goal. I believe that both parties, civilians and military, we all have the same goal and we all are actually trying to get to the same destination. We just don't agree on the route to take. So I'm that person that can build the bridge of understanding because most sides don't understand where the other side is coming from. And I have the most bipartisan support in this race as well. I'm not one-sided.
Robert Foust, where do you stand on the transgender restrooms in the schools?
I don't support it at all. I can't beat around the bush on that. I don't support it. Again, it's like the Second Amendment. Are we going to have a restroom for someone that, you know, feels this way one moment and feels that way the next? Now, I don't know, and I'm not a doctor, and, you know, I'll tell you this. When I go on these interviews, I have consultants, some of the highest paid consultants that'll tell me, don't say this, don't say that, don't do that. And they may be right, they may be wrong. But one of the things that I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you that I'm going to do, is I'm going to take a stand like I just did. I don't support it. Now, whether it's a medical condition, whether you're born feeling that way, whether it's, I don't know, I'm not a doctor. I think we need a tad bit more research to determine whether or not that's something we even need to address. I don't believe that someone that's biologically a man who identifies with being a woman should be able to choose which bathroom he or she goes to. Further, in my opinion, jeopardizing the safety, specifically of our children. If it's in a private business and they wish to put a transgender bathroom in, fine. I do not support public dollars going into such nonsense, and I said nonsense. Hey, maybe it'll come out on Channel 5 after I said that, but what I do believe is in the public sector, in our public education system, where we have impressionable minds, I think we need to wait. And as a parent of an 8-year-old daughter, I would encourage her, and I would discuss this with her, and I already do, because when she was 5, she came home to me and said, Daddy, my friend said that girls can get married. And I said, that's a matter of law, but we separate church and state in this country. And then I began to talk to her about our family beliefs, and that I'm a Christian Baptist. Now, don't get me wrong, my first wife was Muslim. So I understand everyone's religion. I have no problem with it. I just don't want to press upon someone else my opinion or my religion or anything. Because we all have this in the Army, you know, we have this arm's length, okay? And so I believe that if you do believe that you identify with another race or gender, I'm sorry, then that's fine. But don't impress upon my daughter or me or the general public to facilitate something that has such a small percentage of people that are feeling that way. I don't see a lot of people going out of their way to support our military, and less than 1% of the United States have been in the armed forces, yet the majority really, really don't support what we've done. I hope that I answered the question right off the bat, and then I elaborated
You're
as to
good.
why.
You're good.
So,
I'm just gonna quote a couple of the founding fathers and then also one of our former president, John F. Kennedy, and just want to get your thoughts on it. Thomas Jefferson, actually, I'm sorry, George Washington in the 1789 inaugural address, he said, "The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained." And then Abraham Lincoln in 1863, at the proclamation of national fast, had said, "It behooves us then to humble ourselves before the offended power, to confess our national sins and to pray for clemency and forgiveness." And then I'd like to quote John F. Kennedy, which, let me find it here, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, "The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God." I'd like your thoughts on that. And also, do you agree with them, or you think that they were a little bit out in left field?
well, here's that political answer: yes and no. My grandmother's from Louisiana, and she's Christian Baptist, right? I think they called us, the God-fearing gun lovers and all that sort of thing. Well, people fail to realize that guns weren't as they are now in the past. Guns were a part of survival. It's how you ate. It's how you lived your life. It's how you protected your family. There wasn't patrol cars rolling around where you could pick up the phone and dial 911, right? As far as religion, there are times when things are so hard that you fall to your knees and you cry out to the Lord. Now, I sound like I'm preaching here, but the reason I say that is to get back to the quotes there. In all of those quotes, we heard a sentiment of something from the Bible. And then, it was then turned and said that, but there are man laws. But those laws that we create come down, in essence, from the heavens, because it's what we believe and what we believe to be true. And so we guide ourselves by what we think to be moral, what we believe to be moral, and what we believe we should be going in the direction of. I agree that we have laws, that we should create these laws, and those laws are to make us better. But also, in 1993, I tried the first case in trial by peers. I was 16 or 17. And it wasn't until some years later that I read a Review Journal article that had covered that trial. Just for trial by peers, of course. I'm sure you're familiar with trial by peers.
I am.
And there was a quote, and it said, "The law is not just about punishment, but about living in society." Now let that sink in, because I didn't remember that quote. But apparently it was part of my closing argument when I was just a teenager. And it wasn't written down. I didn't write a script. It just came out of me. And now I look back 20 years later and I realize, that is no more applicable today than it was then. It's definitely applicable. Just like those quotes of the men before us. Did they have foresight about what was to come? They may not have. But I believe in God. Okay? And I will never not say publicly or privately that there is a higher power. Whether it's Allah or God or whoever Buddha or whoever you consider to be your higher power. Let's pray that your higher power guides you accordingly. My higher power guides me accordingly to do what I believe is the right thing for not only myself, my family, but my brethren and my community. There was no way I would jump into the hot pot or the hot seat of running for this office without not knowing the future, but having a sense of urgency that we need to correct the path that we're on and guide it correctly, no matter whether we have homosexuality, heterosexuality, whether we have the guy or the girl that loves their guns or not, loves their trucks or not, loves their flag or not. I do not agree with someone who would burn our flag. You know, there's that old quote, you know, I might not agree with everything you say, but I'll fight to my death to protect your right to say it. And that's how I feel, and that's why I believe that those quotes are very important, in that they stress both the higher power and man carrying out what the higher power has ordained for him to do. Or her. So that's where I am on that.
Okay, Mantis, Toboggan. Besides transgender issues,
Yes.
what other rights and choices and freedoms do you think that our government should infringe upon and involve themselves in?
None.
So this is purely against transgender people?
No, what I'm saying is, we're supposed to separate church and state.
Yes,
And
we are.
And the government is there.
Which it sounds like you're not interested in.
No. I'm very interested in separating church and state. That's exactly what I'm interested in. But what I'm saying is, the man or woman himself, we have our morals, we have our values, and they come from a higher power. They don't come from the Constitution. They don't come from
But maybe they
written
don't.
law. Yes.
A lot of our country is actually atheist or different religions who don't actually place any sort of judgments or value
Right.
upon things like that.
So with those people who are atheists, for example, they're not placing their value on the written law either, because the written law is man-made. Now, I'm not going against that, but there's somewhere, and I'm not an atheist, so I
I'm
can't
not
speak for
an
an
atheist
but I
either.
would presume.
However, I value their opinions and morals as well.
Yes, I never said that I did. I do. I'm telling you where I base mine. And I'm also mentioning where, from those quotes, where those men base theirs. Only because...
So you-
I thought we were not supposed to.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to argue. My question was just
Yes.
simply, are there other opinions and issues that you feel our government should infringe upon and?
Yes, which all of them are in my policy. Number one, we talked about education, or at least I touched on education. I believe in, well, the policy of the VA. I believe in expediting and prioritizing veterans' benefits. Jobs, we touched on that before we started, but jobs. We've got things like the ESAs that can't get funded. I don't understand why they can't get funded. Education will only become better if there is a bit of competition. I support giving teachers raises. Oh, that's a bad word, but no. As a business owner, I also know that I'm not going to give anybody a bonus or a raise until they earn it. However, how can the teachers earn it unless they have the tools to be able to do their job? So I also support legislation that will fund tools to be able, so those teachers can teach our children a little better and also educate themselves. Other professions have continuing education. Doctors have continuing professional education. Lawyers have continuing legal education. From my understanding, you can get a bachelor's degree, become a teacher, 1980, it's 2018, without requiring any additional training. Well, times change. My daughter taught me how to use the iPad. She's 8. So if they're advancing, I think our educators also need to advance as well. Now, that being said, I know when I just spoke to a lady in my district 2 days ago, Sandy, put a picture up on Facebook. Her father was an assemblyman in California back in the 60s. She's a teacher. We had a long conversation. And she said, you know, I'm getting my master's, but they don't help me get it and they don't help pay for it, right? The military helps pay for education because we know the value of it. Why don't we help the teachers get further educated? Because it's very valuable to further educate our children. I support legislation that will get them that. And if not pay for it, aid them in it. If we can't do 100% of the pay, give them some of the pay for it. And I also support if they do, because here's where it comes from. Oh, let's give them a reward. Let's say, you know, if you do go back and get that master's or whatnot, that's gonna help further educate our kids, we will give you a raise. But not only that, the tools to help teach our kids. It's not just about give them more money. Clearly, throwing money at problems doesn't work. We've discovered that. You have to, if you're gonna throw money at it, you have to give incentives, other incentives to getting that money as well. Clearly, certain incentives in Georgia didn't work either. We had a lot of educators go to jail for just changing test scores. So we have to monitor that. Now, I know that's a CCSD issue, and that's something that, you know, they get the funding and then they decide what they have to do. But here's the thing. Someone said about Mack Miller. Yes, I just said my name in the third. But I'm everywhere. I work for myself. I have my own business. And I don't normally talk about my opponent because my opponent is an educator. My opponent voted to raise taxes on housing, on real estate. And my opponent also voted, we didn't fund our education system. We didn't fund the ESAs. I found that a real reason why I'm running, okay? And so, I'm everywhere. And when I say I'm everywhere, I make a point of saying that. I take off the suit and I put on my old ACU Army boots that were issued to me to walk my district. I put another suit on and I go over to another event and I get down to the Clark County School District. Every Tuesday, I'm sitting in an SOT meeting. On Thursdays, I'm in a PTA meeting. Now, I know we have a legislative session that only meets every 2 years. But in the meantime, our government doesn't run just between 4 and 5 p.m. And therefore, she can't be everywhere. She can't do what's necessary. I make my own hours, and I've dedicated those hours to this district and to the state. More than a year ago, I reassigned everything in the office to make sure that attorneys, I won't name them, have those matters taken up so that I don't have to be worried about them and I can do it whenever I need to do it. But this is what I do. This is my life. My community has been my life for more than 20 years, and if nothing else proves that, Trial by Peers proves that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. At this point, we would like to give you a minute to tell us why you would like to have the Veterans in Politics endorsed.
Time's up.
Oh, time's up. Okay, all right. If time's up, I would definitely take another question.
Time's up.
Okay. So, again, the reasons why I'm running for Assembly District 5 is just, I have the time to do it. I have the time to dedicate to the state and dedicate to the community. I have the time to dedicate to the children in the district and in the state. I'm appalled at some of the, Winston Churchill, I love it. I'm appalled at some of the questions and some of the comments that I received over the last couple of months. Back in December, I was out in Sandy Valley handing out toys. We handed out more than $200,000 worth of toys and shoes to kids in Sandy Valley and Tonopah in North Las Vegas. Someone had the audacity to say, why were you there? That's not your district. I said, well, first off, if the problem was in my district, I would have been in my district, but I went to where the problem was, where they needed something. I'll end on this. A lady said, I'm sorry I can't help you. I don't live in Assembly District 5. I said, well, you know someone that does. I'm sure you do. And she said, you know, I do. She said, well, what do you want? I said, well, when I get elected as your next assemblyman for District 5, anything I vote on won't just affect people in Assembly District 5. It will affect the entire state. Everyone is so segregated, I hate to use that term, to their district, to their own simple, not simple, but their own, everyone has a concern that's near and dear to them. We have to put it in it. The stew's always better when you add more to it. And that's what I'm adding to the Nevada Assembly. Understanding, nonpartisanship, albeit you know my party affiliation, but we can't get anything done if we stop and butt heads. Unless we not forget, the military accomplishes a mission regardless of who's in power. Because the commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief. And when orders are given, they're carried out. I'm going to Carson City to carry out the orders of the people, regardless of who becomes a governor, and regardless of who has the majority.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our sponsors one more time, Ron Q for Clark County Treasurer, Michael Broadway Real Estate, Real Water, and the Lakeside Business Suites, and that concludes the candidate interview for Nevada State Assembly District 5.